want to talk about the African influence on Europe. A lot of times we hear about the Moors. Talk to us about how the African came into Europe. What was the purpose and how they helped influence and civilize what Europe became?
I would have to take you back before the Moors. There's evidence of Africans in Spain, 1100 BC. There's evidence of them in 700 BC. There is evidence of Africans impacting the Spanish language. And we really don't understand and know who we are. They have not taught us this information. And so it's very difficult to understand who the Moors were, because I always talk about something called episodic history and holistic history. And episodic history is when you teach in episodes. Like, for instance, if you were to teach about the Moors, 711 to 1492, that's episodic. But how did they get there? And you see, what happens is that the system allows you to put Indo-Europeans there where you can actually believe that the University of Timbuktu was created by Islam or by Muslims. The reason why those Indo-Europeans went to Timbuktu was because they knew it was a learning center for hundreds of years before that.
Yes.
When you allow episodic history like Egyptian history, you see, that's why I say you can't understand Kemet if you don't understand Kush, because there is a long-lasting dynastic legacy that would lead Africans from inner Africa straight up into Kemet to create what they created. But when you can cut off the head and you can create an episode, then you can slide Indo-Europeans in like we got now, that will claim that they were part of the builders of the pyramids. They didn't even exist when the pyramids went up.
Uh-huh.
They weren't even in that land area. The people that are in Egypt today are like the Europeans in America today. They were not here thousands of years ago, no more than the people who are there now. They came mass into Africa after 600 whatever, when Islam.
Caliphate.
Okay. That's when they traveled.
Mm-hmm.
But they were not here before. And the only thing that I ask them all the time is, wow, that's some great building you did. But where is it where you come from? You mean to tell me that you came to Africa, you left your land and came to Africa to build things that you didn't build in your own land? Exactly. How did you do that? What was it about Africa that made you do what you did that you didn't do in your own neighborhood? What was, and then why didn't you go back and do it there? After you learned how to do it in Africa, why didn't you go back and do it where you came from?
When we know the answer, Brother Kaba, and that is because the Africans had done this, and African scribes and priests did not give the sacred knowledge away immediately. This is why a lot of the temples were destroyed, and this is why a lot of the ancient science has been lost because of the destruction of, the different temples and the murdering of priests and overthrowing the government of ancient Kemet.
Yeah. And that's why I wrote the 3 books that I wrote. And I wrote them in Trinity form because they're all related to each other. The first book is on William Leo Hansberry, who was the architect for America's African Studies program. He was the first to ever develop any course on Africa taught in an accredited college. My second book was Spirituality Before Religions, because I had to take our people back before their religions were formed. Because we're fighting too much amongst our religions. Okay. Be us a Christian or being a Muslim, being Hebrew, being Buddhist, Rosicrucian, whatever. We all arguing about who's right. We all claim to have a same God. But somehow or other, those gods are whispering in our ears to kill each other.
That's why Malcolm X said, he said, when we walk in a room to talk about unity, we got to put our religions in our pockets.
That's it. As we do everything else that we proselytize, be it our social clubs, our religions, our jobs. And we have to focus in on what is good for the African people.
Right.
We have to become issue oriented and stop getting in each other's business. I belong to a very special club. Got a long name, but I belong to a very special club. And there are people that claim to belong in it, but I don't think that they belong to this club. The club I belong to is titled, I Mind My Own Damn Business. But there's still more to it. It's a long title. I tell you, it's a long title.
Yeah.
But the day I started minding my own damn business was the day I came to realize how much damn business I had to mind.
Right.
Family, I work constantly. I wish there were more hours in the days, more weeks in a year for me to be able to achieve all that I'd like to. I cannot see where I could find the time to get into other people's business with what I'm trying to do for our people.
Right.
I just don't see that time. And going back to the value of time, I just don't see that time. And how do we want to spend our time? Jaw-jacking each other? Or just getting very serious about what we have to do together? I have worked with people that can't stand me. And I can't stand them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the point.
Right.
The point is the issue for our people. And I've had the great opportunity to work with people that couldn't stand me. And we've worked together to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to
moving on people forward.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's all we should be for. You know, I don't care if you weavable or unbelievable. I don't care what you do as it relates to your own personal habits or anything else like that. When the job has to be done, it has to be done. That can be dealt with at a later date. But right now, we have work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been times that we have done what we had to do and been successful. And I'd like to tell you that we became friends. And no, we didn't. We still couldn't stand each other. But we got the job done. And that's all that mattered. I wasn't expecting to be invited to your house for dinner. And ain't no time I was going to invite you to mine. But that's not what we had to do. We had a job. We had an issue that we had to resolve.
You know, that brings me to another point. You know, as I, continue to teach African history like yourself, we run into individuals that, and as you mentioned, we don't have time for it, but we're running into people who feel that there's a difference between Black history and African history. And some people will say that a group of individuals will say that Black history is from 1444, the enslavement of African people, down to the present, as in African history was something before that. And then we're seeing this big divide there. How is it important for Africans in the diaspora to have that Sankofa mentality, to look back at where they were further back, past transatlantic, the Middle Passage, slavery? How important is it for the diaspora to do that?
That's what I mean by episodic and holistic history. All those things that you just described, those are all episodes. How do they all come together into a picture? We have to look at this holistically. Every one of those episodes is very important. But their only importance is how it relates to the whole picture. It's like a puzzle with different pieces. Every piece is important because it makes up the holistic picture. But if you just hold up one piece of the puzzle, that don't mean anything to anybody. It's when you put it together. What is the relationship between an African American such as myself? My mother is from Boston. My father is from Alabama. What is my relationship with my brothers and sisters in Jamaica and in Puerto Rico and in Ghana and in Africans that live in Suriname in South America or in Holland and they speak Dutch? What's my relationship with my Brazilian brothers and sisters? So once you see all those pieces, then everything comes together to see the whole picture.
Right.
Europeans have divided everything up so that we don't understand the importance of understanding Pan-African or what from an African perspective, is called Nebu Afrika, which is, Nebu means all, and Afrika means the flesh of the light and heat energy of the sun, who is us. So it's not just Black people, it's nature. Nebu Afrika is much larger than just human. The humans are included in it, but the whole picture is how do we relate to everything around us?
Right.
And as an African people going back in time and studying, and Africa is a continent, it's not a country. So it's important that we understand the diversification of Africa and the many different types of mindsets and many different types of people, but the same people. So that when we look at this and we understand that you relate to everything in your life has import, whatever it may be. From the tiniest cockroach to the hugest oak tree. It all has some relationship to us. We cannot harm a dolphin and think that's not going to come back on us.
Right.
And nature takes care. Because nature came through. Was hanging around us for about 2 years so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Said, okay.
We
So
know all about it.
Okay. Y'all don't want to get along, right? Y'all can't stand each other. Okay. You all starting trouble. You all starting wars. Okay. Here's what the cosmic Black mother gonna do. I'm coming through and I'm sending you all into your rooms, and don't come out until I tell you. Because you know how mama used to do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She getting ready. Mother Earth is getting ready for her mother to come, the cosmic mother. And all the children are acting up. They fighting, kicking each other, throwing things over, spilling stuff. And Mother Nature's telling the children, look, my mother's coming to visit us. If she see you acting like this, I'm in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to get you right before she even come in this door. So I'm telling y'all, stop. They keep acting up.
Right.
Mother Nature said, and Sister Chey, I think you might know this. She said, don't make me get up out this chair now.
Chey be saying that to her kids.
Okay, that's the last warning mama gives before she does what she has to do.
Before she rise up.
One more chance. Don't make me get up out this chair, because you know what I'll do. But they keep acting up. And mother come through, and everybody scatters.
Exactly.
And that was this virus that just came through.
Mm-hmm.
Put everybody in their room. Not a shot fired, not a bomb dropped, but everybody went home.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Atlanta housewives stayed at home.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's something when that goes. Don't play with nature.
Yeah.
Our arms are too short to box with nature.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take it back for a second, because we did touch on Christopher Columbus and we touched on Spain. I like to hit our viewers with like little fun facts, right? So I would like to say for this fun fact that when we're talking about Spain, right, and we're talking about the African people going into Spain and being there since 1100 BC, I think it's important for people to realize that the southern coast of Spain, Gibraltar, is only 14 miles from Africa. That is extremely close. So it doesn't take, everybody thinks that it's such a, seafaring job and it's so hard. 14 miles is nothing. Most people could swim that if, they're aquatically inclined.
Mm-hmm.
But 14 miles, and then you look at like the Palace of Alhambra, right? Beautiful palace. And the type of architecture and the type of adornments, are rooted in African culture.
Yes.
So I wanted to hit everybody with that little fun fact.
Absolutely.
And I also want to throw one fun fact out there that the Nino and the Pinzone brothers were Black people.
Say it one time for the people in the back.
The Nino and the Pinzone brothers were Black people who helped Christopher Columbus to sail those ships to the Americas. Probably were the navigators.
Let me give you another fun fact to attach to what you just said, because it's very interesting. We find there's a book titled The Life of Columbus, written by John Boyd Thatcher, 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 John Boyd Thatcher, come in 3 volumes. He, through records, can locate Cristobal Colon, because that was his name. His name wasn't Christopher Columbus. They can locate Cristobal Colon on the west coast of Africa in 1482, 10 years before. He knew exactly where he was going because he met Africans that had been going to America. So that's how he knew exactly where he was going. But remember, Cristobal Colon was married to Portuguese royalty. The only reason why he got involved in Spain was because Portugal lost its power and its finances. When Cristobal Colon went on the first voyage and he came back, he ended up in a place called Paraíso. He ended up in the court of Paraíso, which was in Portugal. And by the time he got to Spain, they were wondering, like, well, like, why did you go to Portugal? Why didn't you come back to us? We're the ones that are bankrolling this. Why did you go? He said, well, he got caught up in a storm and he ended up there. The Spanish said, there's no storm. There hasn't been no storm. So that was the first flag that went up on him. By the time his 4th voyage, he set out on his 4th voyage. This is something that they don't tell you. The Spanish crown sent military out to arrest Cristobal Colon, bring him back to Spain, tried him for treason, found guilty, and put in prison for treason. His son, Diego Colon, because that's another thing. Why is his son's name Diego Colon and his name is Cristobal Colon? Cristoforo Colombo. Why is his son's name Colon? Well, that's because they changed Cristobal Colon's name to Cristoforo Colombo, but that's a side story. His son came on his behalf and wanted to get him out of prison. And so the Spanish crown said, okay, we'll do that. But here's what you got. Give us everything he has. Everything he stole. All of his life. And you see, there's a reason why he did that. Because he had a very good friend named Alberigo Vespucci, who was Portuguese. And remember, the Pope divided the world up. The Treaty of Tordesillas divided the world up between the Portuguese and the Spanish. The Spanish got the west side of the mark, the line of demarcation, and the Portuguese got the east. That's how they were able to get into Africa, Mozambique, Angola, places like that. But the thing is that when they came to South America, they came to realize that South America has a lot of mountains. But the most fruitful part of the land is Brazil. And so what Cristobal Colon did was to give the advice to Alberigo and also to the Portuguese royalty that he was married to. And the Pope divided that line twice. He said he made a mistake. And so what he did is he moved the line of demarcation further over to the west, so that Portugal could get Brazil. And the Spanish became aware of what Cristobal Colon was doing. He was a double agent. The Spanish were paying him, but he was really working for the Portuguese. And so his son negotiated, got him out. And they said, we don't care what you do, but you got to get that traitor out of this country. Now, here's a fun fact, or here's a fun question. Where do you think Cristobal Colon, Christopher Columbus, is buried today? He's buried in the Dominican Republic.
Really?
Yes. See, now Spain trying to get his body back because he's so popular. But he was kicked out of Spain because he was a traitor. There was a time in history where Benedict Arnold and Christopher Columbus were synonymous for traitor.
Yep, that's true. I agree with that.
And the only reason why Christopher Columbus, his name was changed from Cristobal Colon to Cristoforo Colombo, and then it was anglicized in the 20th century to Christopher Columbus. And the first Christopher Columbus Day parade was celebrated in 1946 because America thanked the Italian Americans for their double agent and their support of America against Italy and the fascists under Mussolini. Mm-hmm. That's why we have this parade today. They took somebody, changed their name, and gave them to another people as a gift. Does that sound like something else?
That's crazy. Wow.
That's a fun fact right there. Mm. And please, family, don't believe a word I say.
Look it up.
I just want to make you think. The only thing Black folk need to do is think. Yep. When someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. All I want to do, I told you the book that you could go to. The Life of Columbus, John Boyd Thatcher. It's a 3-volume set. It was written in 1905.
Now, does that touch on the theory of Ivan Van Sertima?
Well, there's another book that had impacted Dr. Van Sertima. Dr. Van Sertima quoted, that's how I found out about the book by John Boyd Thatcher. Dr. Wiener.
Leo Wiener.
Yep. Leo Wiener wrote a book.
African Discovery in America.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Van Sertima told me that he purposefully didn't believe it. And he wanted to prove Leo Wiener wrong. And he said, look what came out of me trying to prove him wrong was they came before Columbus. He brought more evidence that Leo Wiener was correct.
Right. Yeah, the African plants, the African plants, the bottle gourds, the squash, the sweet potato, the yam, the plantain. These were African plants that were in the Americas from this, the study of this botanist, Leo Wiener, who was able to prove this in the early 1900s. But, because he was kind of, a minority at that time, so to speak, he was kind of like overlooked. But it's good that Ivan Van Sertima was able to pull that information back up and go further and take it into the Olmec heads. Mm-hmm. I do want to let everyone know, who believe that Van Sertima's idea was that the Olmec people were African, but it wasn't. His idea was that there was a group of Africans who came into Mexico at the time and kind of turned it out and were basically ruling over these native people at that time. Am I correct on that, or?
Yes, and the concept that I always approach that with is how wonderful that concept is to understand. Because by numbers, give or take, we're looking at 13% of the population were African, of the indigenous. Now, remember, these indigenous people are already Black from the past. The Paleo-Americans and the Clovis Folsom, they're already Black. These are a brown people already, but they are known as indigenous because they're here in the American hemisphere.
Right.
But what this shines a light on is the fact that Africans didn't come to conquer. They came to share and return. Mm-hmm. And so their concept of ruling wasn't as much like ruling as much as it was if somebody came into our neighborhood and brought in advanced technology, and they were willing to teach us that and respect us and take us through a process and raise our civilization up. You could say they were ruling us because they'd be telling us what to do. But on another level, they're not really ruling us. They're bringing a civilization in that is superimposing its genius on the genius that we already have that allows us to do better for our people. And the fact that it's only 13%, and this is how they found it in the cemetery. They found 13% of the people buried were African. And the fact is, Africans didn't come to stay. They came to share and go back to Africa. Wow. Some stayed, some intermarried, created civilizations and family, but they blended into the community and they did not abuse the people. It's a different way of looking at the world. And I think the fact that I'm not saying, I'm very clear on this because I know a lot of Native Americans. In fact, I did a 4-part series on the indigenous American. It's in my webinar. If you go to my website, kabakamene.com, you can download my webinars on ancient America. And what we have to know and see is that the world was populated in waves. Africans came here in waves, not just one time, not just the Olmec. They were here with the Paleo-American. They were here with the Clovis Folsom. They came 5 times in the ancient world, but they kept coming here. And indigenous people went to Africa.
Yeah, because we know that I believe it was Ramses II or Ramses III who had cocaine in his stomach and his hair follicles as well.
Exactly. And we find him on the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi River was to American culture what the Nile or the Hapi was to African culture. Mm. It was a throughway. It was a transportation system. Mm-hmm. The Mississippi River, when you're on the Mississippi River, you can, through tributaries and streams and other areas, you can get from the northernmost part of Alaska to the southernmost area of South America called Tierra del Fuego. That's how important the Mississippi River was to the indigenous people. And in the Y of the Mississippi, which is today called Collinsville, Illinois, it was called Cahokia in the ancient world. In that Y, they built the capital called Cahokia, and they have a pyramid called Monk's Mound. And at Monk's Mound and in the surrounding area, because I've done presentations on top of Monk's Mound, and I did it during one of the autumnal equinoxes, where I did a class. It's located right outside St. Louis, where Illinois goes right into St. Louis. It's right in that general area. In fact, the hotel where I stayed was in St. Louis, and the classes I did was in Illinois. And so you see evidence of the Muskegon, the Siouan, the Haudenosaunee, which is misnomered the Iroquois. You can see evidence of indigenous people from Canada to South America. You can see evidences of original languages spoken at Cahokia. You can see tools. You can see trading things where they came from California. They came from parts of Saskatchewan in Canada, Montreal, from northern New York, the Lenape. You know, you can see evidence of them in Illinois. So it's like, if you want to call it, Cahokia was indigenous Americans, Washington, D.C.
Chey, you mentioned in your conference, in your segment of the conference that we did here in Buffalo about the circumnavigation. You also mentioned about the Africans being found in Australia. Do you want to expound a little bit on Khufu and the Africans, the Kemites in Australia as well, which is also part of this circumnavigation conversation?
Yeah, so it was discovered in Gosford, Australia, that Khufu, or in the time of Khufu and Khafre and Djeffrey, that they had came to Australia twice. So, and then what was really fascinating about it was that the language, the hieroglyphs of Khufu's name and Khafre's name was the exact same way as in Egypt in the pyramids of Giza. And in no other place on earth is it the exact same as in those two locations.
When one of the things, like I always say, when someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. There will come a time when the ancient world will be shown for exactly who and what they were. What the Indo-European people have done is they have squashed history. And we should not be surprised at Africans being anywhere in the world under any circumstances, particularly during the Old Kingdom, where you speak of Khufu, the fourth kingdom. We should not be surprised. But because Africans have been so denigrated, and that because the concept of them being able to rule or be in the world at any point in time, we find it almost fantabulous that could be even thought of. But the reality of it is that when true history is shown, my sister Chey, we're going to find out there is so much more to what has happened in the ancient world. The trade. We are going to find that there are civilizations built under the civilizations that we today think are ancient.
Mm-hmm.